Well, so far I have to say Donald Trump is no longer the merchant of chaos. He is acting very methodically, and he's keeping all his promises. This is not chaos. We're getting reports from the Washington Post this morning that Donald Trump has temporarily shut down the Civil Rights Division of our Justice Department. The hypocrisy here is immeasurable. The Civil Rights Division protects marginalized communities and keeps an eye on our cops. They are shutting down investigations into local police forces. This after Donald Trump just issued a blanket pardon for 1,500 people who stormed the Capitol and beat up Capitol police officers. The Civil Rights Division keeps cops honest. It has investigated the Louisville, Kentucky Police Department after the killing of Breonna Taylor. It investigated the Minneapolis Police Department after the killing of George Floyd. In the past decade, the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department issued scathing reports, sometimes entering into consent decrees with police departments like Los Angeles, the Phoenix Police Department, the New York Police Department, recently Baltimore, Worcester, Massachusetts, Oklahoma City, and of course, Ferguson, Missouri. The Civil Rights Division of our Justice Department has repeatedly accused many of these police departments of using excessive force, unjustifiable, deadly force, unlawfully detaining homeless, discriminating against Black, Hispanic, and Native American people. The Civil Rights Division of our Justice Department has accused our local police of violating the rights of people exercising their First Amendment protections. The Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department has accused local police forces of discriminating against people with behavioral health disabilities. It is the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department that tries to keep the cops from being fascist. Donald Trump, according to the Washington Post, has ordered a freeze on all civil rights enforcement inside our Justice Department. This is unprecedented. Damon Hewitt, president and executive director of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, tells the Washington Post this morning, quote, "It's beyond unusual. We've never seen this before at this scale with any transfer of power, regardless of the ideology of any incoming president or administration." He went on to say this should make Americans both angry and deeply worried. This is more than just a changing course of philosophy. He said this is exactly what most people in the civil rights community feared, a Justice Department that was created to protect civil rights, literally abdicating its duty and responsibility to protect Americans from all forms of discrimination, unquote. The January 6 pardons, the hypocrisy here. 1,500 pardoned for beating up Capitol police officers. Donald Trump freezing the Civil Rights Division of our Justice Department, which is there primarily to keep cops honest. I'll have more on the January 6 pardons later on in the show. The television audience for Trump's inauguration plummeted compared to Joe Biden's 4 years ago and Trump's first inauguration 8 years ago. Ratings plummeted as more Americans are tuning out the news, which is exactly what Trump wants. Reuters, a new poll from Reuters shows Trump's already underwater. A Reuters poll conducted in January, right as Donald Trump took office, now finds that 47% of Americans approve of Donald Trump's presidency, which means 53% disapprove. He's already underwater. Donald Trump demanded an apology after Tuesday's National Prayer Service, where Bishop Marian Edgar Bood asked Trump to give mercy to those who are scared, to protect instead of terrify and discriminate against the LGBTQ community and undocumented immigrants. It was a great sermon. She said, this is what she said from the pulpit, looking directly into Donald Trump's eyes. He looked away and he was pissed. She said, "Let me make one final plea, Mr. President. Millions have put their trust in you, and as you told the nation yesterday, you have felt the providential hand of a loving God. In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now." And then she specifically highlighted the LGBTQ plus community, the children who are LGBTQ plus. And of course, she highlighted the struggles of immigrants, emphasizing how much they contribute to our society and how deserving they are of our Christian compassion. And he demanded an apology. And he called the sermon nasty. He called her nasty. Anytime a woman criticizes this little man, he calls the woman nasty. Congresswoman Lisa McClain is chair of the House Republican Conference. She's third in the House leadership. She called the bishop, who spoke on Tuesday, quote, extreme in her views, extremely out of line and out of touch. Really? It's extreme to show mercy? That's extreme? Congresswoman McClain said, quote, "The days of negativity are over." Yeah, because the past 4 days have been nothing but positive. The House passed the Senate's final version of the Laken Riley Act. It now heads to Trump's desk for a signature. His first win, 46 House Democrats voted in favor of the bill on Wednesday. 12 Democrats voted in favor of the bill last Thursday. They caved. The Democrats just caved on this. A spokesperson for the Department of Homeland Security said yesterday ICE agents have been given the green light to raid churches looking for undocumented immigrants. This reverses a long-held policy that kept hospitals, schools, and churches off limits to ICE agents. That massive first-day crackdown didn't materialize, although Tom Homan did say about 300 to 400 immigrants were rounded up yesterday. Emil Bove is both Trump's criminal attorney as well as the acting deputy attorney general. He wrote a memo yesterday that the Justice Department will be challenging in the courts sanctuary cities that harbor undocumented Americans and or thwart the work of ICE. They are going through the courts to try to get sanctuary cities to cooperate with ICE. Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, has said Chicago will be ground zero for his massive roundup of undocumented workers. And then he also said this.
If I may, I'd like to describe what I see first thing in the morning when I change my bed sheets. I see blisters, sores, bumps, blood, redness, and a thick, viscous, foul-smelling fluid oozing everywhere. And that's just my wife, Marie, sleeping next to me.
Well,
She is a foul-smelling variety pack of dripping lymph nodes and venereal discharges.
She's a what? She's a variety pack of venereal discharge? That's no way to talk. I don't know if that's actually Tom Homan. I'm going to guess we altered that, I think. Anticipating the raids in Chicago, the Chicago City Council on January 15th voted to maintain its Welcoming Citizens Ordinance, which was passed back in 2012. After Trump's inauguration, parts of Chicago, where undocumented Americans live and work, have been described as ghost towns, as so many of them have now gone into hiding. Chicago's Welcoming Citizens Ordinance forbids local police from enforcing federal immigration laws. Good on you, Chicago. All city officials in Chicago, including the police, are forbidden from asking about anyone's immigration status, even when they've been arrested. These same laws pretty much apply in New York City and Los Angeles, which are also sanctuaries for undocumented Americans. Only in rare exceptions, when it involves a severely violent crime, will police be allowed in Chicago to cooperate with the monsters from ICE? ICE, of course, should be abolished. Yesterday, Trump, in direct violation of international law, halted refugee processing and refugee travel to the United States. This will strand hundreds of refugees from Afghanistan who assisted our military for the past 21 years and were then promised safety from the Taliban here in the United States. That offer is now temporarily off the table. Democratic Senator Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire sits on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee after Trump's announcement. She said, quote, "Our country is now turning its back on those in need." Now turning its back on those in need? Now? Trump sent 1,500 American troops to our border along Mexico, and he plans to send 10,000 more troops. Meanwhile, border crossings are at a 4-year low. New York City's Mayor Eric Adams canceled scheduled appearances at Martin Luther King Day events in order to attend Donald Trump's inauguration. Made this decision at the last minute. You might recall last year, the Justice Department indicted Mayor Adams for accepting bribes and illegal campaign contributions from the nation of Turkey. Adams denies he's angling for a pardon from Trump by attending the inauguration or promising Tom Homan, the border czar, that New York City will cooperate with ICE during the roundups. He promised that. He can't because New York City is a sanctuary. According to the website The City, it covers New York City, an official memo went out Friday telling all New York City employees not to cooperate with ICE. Like Chicago and Los Angeles, New York is a sanctuary city. It is estimated New York City is home to 650,000 undocumented Americans. 470,000 of them work in construction as nannies, babysitters, housekeepers, personal chefs, restaurant workers, as well as home and personal care aides, janitors, and delivery drivers. This city cannot run without them. New York City's Department of Education has instructed all teachers and public school employees do not talk to ICE. This is the same exact mandate coming down from Los Angeles Unified Schools. Nobody, no teacher, no parent, no administrator, no police officer working in the school, or no police officer in Los Angeles is allowed to ask for anyone's immigration status. As I said earlier, this POS, Emil Bove, Trump's criminal attorney and now acting deputy attorney general, wrote a memo yesterday saying the Department of Justice will be challenging the legality of sanctuary cities in the courts. They're taking San Francisco, LA, Chicago, New York to the court to challenge sanctuary cities. Emil Bove, this homunculus, in the memo cites the supremacy clause of the Constitution. Well, this dirty, filthy monster, acting deputy attorney Emil Bove, would be well advised to take a look at Prince v. United States, where the Supreme Court ruled in 1997 that the federal government cannot commandeer local police to make them enforce the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act's provision that ordered local police to conduct background checks on anyone purchasing a gun. The conservatives have been hoisted by their own petard. It was a ruling, a majority opinion written by Antonin Scalia, who said local police cannot be used to enforce Brady handgun background checks. Scalia wrote the majority opinion. He said the 10th Amendment prevents the federal government from dictating which federal laws states must enforce. In other words, the federal government, said Scalia, has to do the background checks. The same way the federal government has to round up undocumented Americans, and local police, the states, sanctuary cities are not required to lift a finger, hoisted by their own petard. Isn't states' rights grand? All four of my grandparents came through Ellis Island, and this anti-immigrant crap is making the Statue of Liberty sick to her stomach. Look at this. This is a picture of the Statue of Liberty last night in the harbor, cigarette dangling from her lips, beer in one hand. She was out last night drinking at Boyd Ackerman's Red Hand here on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. It's a singles bar. There's the Statue of Liberty. She is way too old to be hanging out at Boyd Ackerman's Red Hand. The preppy murderer hung out at Boyd Ackerman's Red Hand. Look at that. That's Robert Chambers. You see Robert Chambers trying to pick up on the Statue of Liberty? Look at that. Look at that. She can barely stand. And this preppy sleazeball, Robert Chambers, is prying the Statue of Liberty with cocktails. Something totally non-consensual is about to... Oh, no, wait a second. That's not Robert Chambers. That's not the preppy murderer. That's somebody even worse. That's Pete Hegseth, Trump's pick for defense secretary. Look at this pig. Look at the Statue of Liberty is stumbling out of the bar, and Hegseth is copping a feel. What a disgraceful pig Pete Hegseth is. This is the mop-up for January 23rd, 2025. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you for finding me. Please like this episode so I remain in your feed, and please help me. It's going to be harder and harder to find this show. This is an audio podcast. You can download it wherever you get your audio podcasts. Please share these episodes with like-minded people. I'm not going to get into what's going on, but you pretty much know. So I need your help. Please don't leave me. So copy and paste these episodes and share them. Subscribe to my channel, subscribe to my newsletter, and hit the notifications bell. And follow me on Blue Sky. Please follow me on Blue Sky. I don't want to lose you. It's harder now to be found. Okay? The good news is I have a sponsor. Not really. This portion of the show is brought to you by Dr. Feldman's Smoker's Tooth Polish for Kids. Little Barry, look at him. He's 4 years old. He's up to 3 packs a day. And nobody wanted to play with little Barry at nursery school because of his brownish, yellowish teeth. That's 3 packs a day, So, but look at that. There's the before and after picture. 1 week of Dr. Feldman's Smoker's Tooth Polish for Kids. Barry's dance card is completely filled up. Why? Because his teeth, no more nasty tobacco or coffee stains for little Barry. Dr. Feldman's Smoker's Tooth Polish for Kids, ethically sourced and 100% natural, gentle for a child, but strong enough for mom. Mom can use it too. Mom can use it too. President Trump is threatening to invade Greenland for its minerals and oil. The problem is Greenland is part of Denmark. Anders Vistien, a Danish member of parliament, addressing the European Parliament on Tuesday, said, quote, "Dear President Trump, listen very carefully. Greenland has been part of the Danish kingdom for 800 years. It's an integrated part of our country. It is not for sale. Let me put it in words you might understand, Mr. Trump. F off." But he said the actual F word before the European Parliament, which broke out into applause because when Donald Trump is president, the world hates us. Donald Trump ordered his former national security advisor, John Bolton's security detail to stand down. Trump said nobody gets permanent Secret Service protection, except, of course, for Donald Trump. Former presidents get permanent Secret Service protection. Trump is punishing John Bolton for calling Trump incompetent and uninformed. After learning that his Secret Service detail had been dismissed, Bolton said, quote, "Trump just invited Iran to kill me." Well, John Bolton, you could have testified during Trump's first impeachment trial, but you didn't want to hurt book sales. None of this would be happening right now if you agreed to testify back in 2020. But you didn't want to hurt your book sales. Bolton was UN ambassador under George W. Bush. He famously said before taking the post of UN ambassador, quote, "If you lopped off 10 stories of the United Nations building in New York, it wouldn't make a bit of difference." Trump's nominee for UN ambassador, former New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, pretty much shares the same views. During her confirmation hearing, Stefanik spoke out against multilateralism she spoke in favor of defunding the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East. Speaking of relief, on Wednesday, Trump suspended America's foreign aid to countries that are in need. Foreign aid. America's foreign aid has been suspended for 90 days. No longer a merchant of chaos. He's working off the fascist playbook, otherwise known as Project 2025. We knew this was going to happen. Everybody knew this. There are no surprises here. He is cutting off foreign aid to countries around the world for 90 days. That should come as really no surprise. On a per capita basis, the United States is one of the stingiest nations in the world. We are the least generous towards other nations as well as towards our own people. We give roughly $60 billion a year in non-military aid to foreign countries. Remember, military aid to countries like Israel, Ukraine, Saudi Arabia, that is just another way of subsidizing our defense industry. We're talking about non-military aid. America's GDP is roughly $30 trillion per year. That means our entire economy creates $30 trillion of wealth every year. And of that $30 trillion, we give $60 billion a year in non-military aid to foreign countries. You know, in order to make that $30 trillion, we do a lot of damage overseas. 60 billion. You know what that is? That's 0.155% of America's entire GDP. 0.155% of America's entire GDP is allotted for non-military foreign aid. You don't get a $30 trillion economy without ravaging the planet without ravaging foreign countries, especially poor foreign countries. $60 billion we give out of a $30 trillion economy. The USA, it gives the most in total, but we come in 10th per capita. First is Norway, followed by Switzerland, then Sweden, then Germany, the Netherlands, the United Kingdom, Canada, Belgium, France, and then America. In all fairness, that's measuring government, not private foreign aid. Americans, like Bill Gates, are handing out billions to countries in need each year, but there's no transparency. That's not America. That's a billionaire who kind of lives in America, but he doesn't have to explain any of his decisions. And when it comes to keeping score, a lot of countries count taking in refugees as foreign aid. That's not really foreign aid. So Germany says it gives a lot in foreign aid. Well, it accepted, I think, more than 1 million Syrian refugees. God bless Germany, but that isn't foreign aid. No major tariff announcements this week other than Trump promising a 10% tariff on all Chinese imports by February. For the first time since 1991, there are now more registered Republicans than registered Democrats here in the United States. There are about 1% more registered Republicans than registered Democrats. Donald Trump has remade the Republican Party in his own image. There are no good Republicans. Very few good. There are no good Republicans left. There are reports Trump has threatened to invoke a constitutional right he may or may not even have by adjourning Congress so that he can bypass confirmation hearings and start making recess appointments. Article 2, Section 3 of the Constitution grants the president power to convene both houses of Congress for emergency sessions. This has been done throughout our history to address major crises. But no president has ever adjourned Congress, especially to make recess appointments. By law, the president can appoint members of his cabinet without Senate confirmation if the Senate is in recess. Now, when you make a recess appointment, that cabinet member can only serve a year, and then the president has to officially nominate that person or have them go or wait for the Senate to adjourn and reappoint that official as a recess appointment. I didn't explain that well, and I apologize. Trump is reportedly unhappy with the speed his nominees are being confirmed. It's not even a week. John Ratcliffe is most likely to be confirmed later today as our new CIA chief. Billionaire Scott Bessent, Trump's pick for Treasury, is probably confirmed today or tomorrow. Trump's pick for Department of Homeland Security, dog murderer, Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota, she's going to be confirmed no later than next Monday. She's going to be head of the Department of Homeland Security. Marco Rubio has already been sworn in as Secretary of State after winning Senate confirmation on Monday by a vote of 99-0. There isn't a senator from Ohio because J.D. Vance just got bumped up to vice president, so it was 99 votes instead of 100. The Senate might take a procedural vote today on Pete Hegseth, Trump's pick for defense. Now, a procedural vote is not a vote to confirm. It's a motion on whether to proceed with the confirmation process. During Monday's inaugural hype, the Senate Armed Services Committee, under radar, fast-tracked Hegseth's nomination. It came out of committee. The committee voted 14-13 along party lines, moving Hegseth's nomination to the Senate floor for a full vote. Like I said, we're probably looking at a procedural vote on Hegseth later today. However, Maine Republican Senator Susan Collins is now calling Hegseth's FBI background check insufficient. Axios reporting this morning that rank-and-file senators were not allowed to see Hegseth's FBI report. Senate Armed Services Chair Roger Wicker, he's the Republican from Mississippi, and the ranking member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Jack Reed, Democrat from Rhode Island, they, according to Axios, were briefed by the FBI about what was in the report, but they were not allowed to read it. Axios now reporting that a member of Trump's transition team was in the room while the FBI briefed the two senators. Only two senators have been briefed on the FBI's background check of Pete Hegseth. Nobody can read it. Nobody, not even Jack Reed or Roger Wicker, the leaders of the Armed Services Committee. Axios reports that the two senators were not even allowed to take notes as they received the briefing from the FBI on their Pete Hegseth background check. Gee, I wonder if Hegseth has something to hide. Hegseth's former sister-in-law has stepped forward with a sworn affidavit alleging Hegseth engaged in domestic abuse with his previous wife. But Republican Senator Joni Ernst, Republican from Iowa, she sits on the Armed Services Committee and is a victim of sexual abuse. She says she will vote to confirm Hegseth anyway. Joni Ernst dismissed the affidavit, calling it meaningless, adding that Hegseth's ex-wife, quote, simply wants to be left alone. So it's Pete Hegseth who wants it to be left alone. Daniel Hegseth was married to Pete Hegseth's brother, Nathaniel Hegseth, from 2011 to 2019, and she became friendly with Samantha Hegseth, Pete's ex-wife. Daniel Hegseth, in a sworn affidavit, said Pete's ex-wife locked herself in a closet, fearing for her life, while texting her the safe word they had established to notify her when Pete was threatening her physically. The affidavit also recounts Hegseth's excessive drinking in uniform, as well as visits to strip clubs in uniform. Republicans call this, quote-unquote, anonymous hearsay. Anonymous hearsay. It's not anonymous. It's not anonymous. The woman's name is Daniel Hegseth, the woman who filed a police report accusing him of rape. Not anonymous. Susan Collins didn't want to meet with her. Not anonymous. Not hearsay. From the horse's mouth. Mother Jones Magazine reporting this morning that because of his deeply held Christian beliefs, Pete Hegseth has insisted women shouldn't be allowed to vote. In the sworn affidavit from his former sister-in-law, Hegseth reportedly said, quote, women should not vote or work because Christians need to have more children so they can overtake the Muslim population, unquote. The Great Replacement Theory. Kiara Butler, writing in Mother Jones, says Hegseth has ties to the Theo Bros. The Theo Bros. They're a Christian nationalist group of white men who believe that the United States should be ruled by biblical law and that women must be subservient to men. Google the Theo Bros. Doug Wilson is the spiritual leader of the Theo Bros, and according to Mother Jones, he has repeatedly said women should not be allowed to vote. Missouri Republican Senator Eric Schmidt called the latest charges against Hegseth a desperate, a sad attempt by Democrats to oust a reformer. Yes, a reformer. Well, yeah, he's going to reform things. Yeah, things will be different. So all it takes is 3 Republican senators to kill the Hegseth nomination, but Senate Armed Services Chairman Roger Wicker said he believes there are enough votes for Hegseth to be confirmed possibly this week. Trump signed an executive order banning transgender troops from serving in our military. Let me repeat. Donald Trump signed an executive order banning transgender troops from serving in our military. What more is there to say on that? Trump signed an executive order placing all federal employees whose job it is to promote DEI. There were people who work in the federal government who are hired to work on diversity. They've all been placed on paid leave. He has also ordered federal workers to snitch on any other federal workers who use DEI in their hiring practices. Trump revoked a 60-year-old executive order signed by President Lyndon Johnson banning discrimination in federal hiring. Let me repeat. Donald Trump revoked a 60-year-old executive order signed by President Lyndon Johnson banning discrimination in federal hiring. Many call this executive order, signed by Lyndon Johnson, the springboard for all laws banning discrimination in the private sector. The Spanish version of the White House website has been taken down. You go to the Spanish website, it just says nada, nothing. Elon Musk attacked Wikipedia yesterday, calling it biased legacy media. Wikipedia is legacy media. He says they're biased because the open source encyclopedia, the people-powered encyclopedia, called his fascist salute Sunday night. They called it what it was, a fascist salute. Twice. And don't tell me the Anti-Defamation League said it was okay. I don't want to get into it with the Anti-Defamation League. That's for another show. But for the Anti-Defamation League to exonerate Elon Musk's Zig Heil twice, what's going on with the ADL? What's going on with the ADL? White nationalist and self-described Nazi Nick Fuentes celebrated Musk's salute. During a live stream yesterday, Fuentes said, quote, "That was a straight up like Zig Heil. That was just loving Hitler energy." Yeah, but the Anti-Defamation League clears Elon Musk on that Zig Heil. What's going on with the ADL? Musk's estranged transgender daughter took to social media to say, "Don't pretend it wasn't a Hitler salute." Musk's estranged daughter said her father repeatedly berated her for being queer. By the way, here is Adolf Hitler, who not only promoted but helped design the Volkswagen, very energy-efficient car. It was the people's wagon. Here he is with an energy-efficient people's wagon, the Volkswagen. That was mostly Hitler's design. And here's Elon Musk, born into apartheid-era South Africa with this year's Tesla. Just thought I'd point that out. That's Hitler and the Volkswagen and Elon Musk with his Tesla. Well, this is the mop-up for January 23rd, 2025. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Again, please like this. Please share it. For obvious reasons, it's going to get harder and harder to find me. So hit the like button, subscribe to my newsletter, to my channel. This is an audio podcast. You can, if you want a transcript of this, just go to Apple iTunes. There's a free transcript on Apple iTunes if you need that, and follow me on Blue Sky. Stay in touch with me. Don't leave. This is going to be a little difficult for a couple of decades. It's going to be okay. A brand new Reuters poll says 58% of Americans disapprove of Donald Trump pardoning 1,500 monsters who were arrested for storming the nation's Capitol on January 6. Daniel Ball was one of the January 6ers pardoned on Monday. The next day, Ball was arrested again on a gun charge. Ball was charged with assaulting a Capitol Hill police officer with an explosive on January 6. Ball, a convicted felon, according to police, had a .22 caliber rifle and ammunition on his property, which is against the law. Convicted felons can't have rifles and ammunition. Our country's largest police unions blasted Trump on Tuesday for issuing the January 6 pardons. The Fraternal Order of Police, America's largest police union, and the International Association of Chiefs of Police on Tuesday said Trump was wrong for pardoning anyone who assaults a police officer. Trump received endorsements from the Fraternal Order of Police in all 3 presidential elections. Well, he just shut down or froze the Civil Rights Division of our Justice Department. So the cops should be very happy now. There's going to be no more consent decrees, no more investigations of police using Ferguson's black community as a source of income. That was what the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department concluded, that the police in Ferguson, Missouri, paid the bills of the city by shaking down black residents, busted taillights, bench warrants, putting them in permanent cycles of debt over meaningless infractions. Read the Civil Rights Division's report on the Ferguson Police Department. It's monumental, a complete indictment of how police treat black people. They literally mine, if you read the report, the police in Ferguson literally mine black people. Like, just how do we arrest a black person and then just keep fining them until we can put them into jail and fine them some more? That's what you do if you don't want to raise taxes. You just keep arresting black people, putting them in permanent cycles of debt. Read the Obama Justice Department's report on the Ferguson Police Department. There are all these reports you can read over at the Justice Department about the Los Angeles Police, the Phoenix Police, the Memphis Police, the Georgia Police, the Worcester, Massachusetts Police, the Rochester Police, the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department, which Trump just froze, is there to keep us safe from the cops. Just got frozen. This is, you know what's going on. You know what's going on, but let's tune out the news. Stewart Rhodes, the Oath Keepers founder, who was sentenced to 18 years for seditious conspiracy for the role he played on January 6, left prison after his pardon, and he headed straight for Washington, D.C. Of course he did. During his trial, prosecutors played a recording of Stewart Rhodes 4 days after January 6, telling someone His only regret about January 6 is that the Oath Keepers didn't bring rifles into the Capitol building that day. He was also recorded saying that had he found Nancy Pelosi, quote, I would have hanged effing Pelosi from a lamp post. Asked about that statement on Wednesday while he was walking around the Capitol, Stewart Rhodes told reporters he was, quote, drunk and pissed off when he made those comments. Making the rounds on Capitol Hill Wednesday, Stewart Rhodes was photographed stopping off at the Dunkin' Donuts inside the Capitol building. This is an actual photograph of Stewart Rhodes inside the Capitol Dunkin' Donuts. Kind of shocking that they would allow a Dunkin' Donuts inside our nation's capital. But then I realized Dunkin' Donuts is owned by the Carlyle Group. That would be David Rubenstein's war profiteer private equity firm. Dunkin' Donuts, owned by the Carlyle Group, as well as Bain Capital, I believe. So, of course, Dunkin' Donuts would be in our nation's capital. Then, after enjoying coffee and a bran muffin, Rhodes visited Statuary Hall to pee on George Washington while taking a massive oath all over the statue of Abraham Lincoln for freeing the slaves. Okay, that's not true. I altered that picture. Rhodes told reporters Wednesday about his visit to the Capitol. Right now, I like to come here as much as I can. I'm sure you do. He said it was stupid for the Justice Department to arrest his fellow Oath Keepers, insisting, quote, my guys they blundered through the doors on January 6. Wait a second. Let me go full screen here. That's Stewart Rhodes. What's going on here? There's something strange here. What's different? What do you notice? I can't figure out, but he looks different in this picture than he does from that picture, but I can't figure out what it is. Somebody's been playing with Photoshop, and this didn't happen to him serving our country, so it's okay to do this. It didn't happen overseas fighting for freedom. So it's perfectly okay in my rule book. Do, 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 do. He wasn't serving our country when that happened. Okay, where are we? With Enrique Tarrio, leader of the Proud Boys, sentenced to more than 20 years for seditious conspiracy for the role he played on January 6, now being pardoned and released, along with other members of the Proud Boys, Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin, who served on the January 6 committee, asked if Trump's January 6 pardons were intended to create an army of political foot soldiers for Donald Trump. What do you think? What do you think? Huh? What do you think? Pamela Hemphill, also known as the MAGA Granny, who was arrested on January 6 and who served 60 days in jail for participating in the insurrection, said, I reject Donald Trump's pardon. The MAGA Granny told the BBC yesterday, quote, we were wrong that day. We broke the law. No pardons, unquote. U.S. District Judge Tanya, notice how the women, I don't want to sound, it's the women who always do the right thing. U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan, besides presiding over Donald Trump's now defunct election interference case, she also presided over the trials of several people arrested on January 6. On Wednesday, Judge Tanya Chutkan said Trump's pardons, quote, cannot whitewash the blood, feces, and terror that the mob left in its wake. This is Judge Tanya Chutkan. Trump's pardons, quote, cannot whitewash the blood, feces, and terror that the mob left in its wake. She added, quote, and it cannot repair the jagged breach in America's sacred tradition of peacefully transitioning power. U.S. District Judge Beryl Howell, woman, presided over several high-profile January 6 cases and recently ruled Rudy Giuliani was in contempt of court for continuing to defame the two Georgia election workers he was ordered to pay $150 million to for falsely claiming they stuffed ballots for Joe Biden in the 2020 presidential election. Well, she presided over several high-profile January 6 cases. Yesterday, she had to dismiss one because of Trump's pardon. Judge Beryl Howell wrote that she took exception to the wording of Donald Trump's pardon in which he claimed, quote, these pardons end a grave national injustice that has been perpetrated upon the American people over the last 4 years and begins a process of national reconciliation, unquote. That's what the pardon said. Judge Beryl Howell wrote, no national injustice occurred here. She's talking about the courtroom. No national injustice occurred here inside this courtroom. Just as no outcome determinative election fraud occurred in the 2020 presidential election. That's some legalese. She's saying there was no injustice, the same way there was no election fraud in the 2020 presidential election. I don't know why she just can't say it simply. She goes on to write, no process of national reconciliation can begin when poor losers whose preferred candidates loses in a... Let me start again. She writes, no process of national reconciliation can begin when poor losers whose preferred candidate loses an election are glorified for disrupting a constitutionally mandated proceeding in Congress and doing so with impunity. That merely raises the dangerous specter of future lawless conduct by other poor losers and undermines the rule of law. Yet, this presidential pronouncement of a national injustice is the sole justification provided in the government's motion to dismiss the pending indictment, unquote. So, Judge Beryl Howell, great judge, some advice. You better learn how to effing write clearly and concisely. We're not low information voters. We can't understand what the F you're talking about. Now, I know you're brilliant, but learn how to write simply so simple people like me can understand it. We're relying on you to protect what's left of our legal system. I mean, look at this sentence. This is what she writes. No national injustice occurred here, just as no outcome determinative election fraud occurred in the 2020 presidential election. I had to reread that 4 times to figure out what the F you're saying. I'm sorry, I'm not as smart as you, okay? Learn to write. The only reason they write with these long clauses is to obfuscate and keep us from understanding these decisions. To make it's why some people want the Catholic Mass in Latin. It's why Jewish services are in Hebrew. Better, the idiots like David Feldman can't understand what the high priests are writing and thinking. This is one of the reasons we're losing our democracy, because these judges refuse to write so we can understand it. Seriously. The arrogance to write law for other judges, that you have to You have to go to school for 3 years just to learn how to read this crap. Tom Tillis is the Republican senator from North Carolina. That's how they justify 3 years of law school, by creating another language. Tom Tillis is the Republican senator from North Carolina. When asked about the pardons, he said, quote, "Just can't agree. Raises safety issues for lawmakers." Tillis, by the way, was censured by the North Carolina Republican Party last year. Well, he must have done something pretty bad to get censured by his own party. What did he do? He voted in support of LGBTQ rights. He voted in favor of red flag laws to reduce gun violence. And he engaged in criticism of Donald Trump's immigration proposals. He supported that bipartisan immigration bill last year. So he got censured by the North Carolina Republican Party. Pretty soon, I mean, this is one of the good guys, or he's a good Republican. Republican Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma introduced that bipartisan border bill last year that Trump ended up killing. Remember? He said, kill that bill. Immigration can't be solved while Joe Biden is president. Well, Biden solved it anyway. Border crossing, 4-year low. Lankford said there must be a price for attacking police. Well, apparently there isn't when Trump is president. Senator Lisa Murkowski, Republican from Alaska, said of the pardons, quote, "I'm disappointed to see that. And I do fear the message that is sent to these great men and women that stood by us." You were disappointed to see this. You don't like the message it sends. Having Stewart Rhodes and Enrique Tarrio wander free. You don't like the message that sends. Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican from Louisiana, I think he's a doctor. He said of Trump's pardons, quote, "I'm a big back the blue guy." Okay. More like a big black and blue guy for the blue. I mean, that's all right. Now it gets worse. Just when you think it couldn't get any worse, here comes the liar, Speaker Mike Johnson, who told reporters yesterday, "I'm not going to second guess Donald Trump's January 6 pardons." Johnson said yesterday he was okay with the pardons because he said he believes in redemption. He believes in redemption and second chances. Unless, of course, you're an immigrant or poor, right? On food stamps. No second chances. Appearing on Meet the Press on Sunday, the liar, Mike Johnson, sang from a completely different hymnal, saying only peaceful protesters on January 6th should be pardoned. He added violent criminals should not be pardoned. He said on Meet the Press Sunday, violent protesters doing time for January 6th should not be pardoned. But during his weekly official press conference, Johnson said, pardoning the January 6ers was fine. It's time to put it behind us. Then he added, but Biden's pardons for his family members was, quote, shocking and disgusting, unquote. He said he was okay. This is the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, who said, it's time to move past January 6th. But Joe Biden pardoning his brother, his sister, his other brother, and his brother-in-law and his sister-in-law, Mike Johnson calls that shocking and disgusting. I, for one, how about unsafe, right? I mean, Jimmy Biden is walking free among us, making deals, cashing in on the Biden name. I do not feel safe. It's just as bad as Enrique Tarrio and Stewart Rhodes of the Oath Keepers wandering around the Capitol. Then Mike Johnson said of the Joe Biden pardons for his family, he rhetorically asked, If they're not members of the Biden crime family, this is what the Speaker of the House, the liar, Mike Johnson, said. He said, if they're not members of the Biden crime family, if you say there's no such thing as a Biden crime family, then why did they need pardons? Oh, because Donald Trump just took over the Justice Department. You may not have noticed. Johnson refused follow-up questions about Trump's pardons for the January 6ers, saying, quote, we're not looking backwards, we're looking forward. And to prove he's only looking forward, Mike Johnson announced the formation of a new committee to determine what really happened on January 6th. That's just keep going ahead, move forward. The new January 6th committee will be chaired by Georgia Congressman Barry Loudermilk. Loudermilk explained, quote, you have to look backwards to look forwards. Okay. Isn't that from The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway? You have to look backwards to look, or you got to get in to get out. I'm sorry. I sometimes confuse Barry Loudermilk with Peter Gabriel. This is not the Carpet Crawlers. I apologize. You have to look backwards to look forwards. Okay. Well, how are we doing on time here? Okay, it's going to get a little dry here now. This is me upset, angry, and you might want to stop watching right now because it's going to get a little in the weeds here, but I'm going to soldier on here. If you're going to leave me, and I recommend you do, please hit the like button. Please follow me on Blue Sky. Share this, please. Share it. Subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to my newsletter. Brush your teeth. Comb your hair. Don't eat garlic. And again, if you're visiting me, do not wash your socks and underwear in my kitchen sink. I don't want to get into it again, but if you're staying in somebody's apartment in New York City, buy new socks and underwear. I'm saving you $5,000 a day on a hotel room. Go buy some new socks and underwear instead of washing it in my kitchen sink where I clean my vegetables and even the mice. I haven't seen the mice for 3 days. Okay. Barry Loudermilk, the January 6th investigation. Go away. You don't want to hear this. Trust me. This is... So, Speaker Kevin McCarthy, back in 2023, originally named Georgia Republican Barry Loudermilk to, I'm not going to say anything about the name, Barry Loudermilk, to investigate the January 6th committee. This was back in 2023. So the January 6th committee issued its report at the end of 2022. There's a new Congress. Kevin McCarthy's the speaker, and he says, we're going to investigate the January 6th committee. The dictate for Barry Loudermilk in early 2023 was change the narrative. Investigate the January 6th committee. Shift the blame from Trump to Nancy Pelosi. Insist that Donald Trump, in the days leading up to January 6th, offered Pelosi additional troops to protect the Capitol, but she refused them. Poke holes. This was the mandate. Poke holes in the January 6th committee's final report. Delegitimate the entire process. That was Barry Loudermilk's mandate. As seen in this photo from January 5th, 2021, Barry Loudermilk was investigated by the January 6th committee for possibly providing a reconnaissance tour on January 5th, 2021 for about 15 people who wandered around the Capitol, took photos of, security checkpoints, stairwells, entry points to the Capitol. Loudermilk insisted none of these people ended up entering the Capitol the next day, but some of them were outside. From what I've read, these are the surveillance photographs. From what I've read, I'm almost certain Barry Loudermilk didn't know these people were possibly troublemakers. I don't think Barry Loudermilk was giving them a reconnaissance tour. But maybe not the best guy to ask to investigate the January 6th committee. They asked him to come in and explain himself. Maybe not the best guy, maybe a little biased. So the Loudermilk committee issued its report on the January 6th committee this month on January 3rd, right before the new Congress was sworn in. So this was old business from the 118th Congress, a report on the January 6th committee, which was from the 117th Congress. In his report, Loudermilk blames then Acting Secretary of Defense Christopher Miller for ignoring then President Trump's order 3 days before January 6th to use all necessary military assets to protect the Capitol as January 6th demonstrators flooded into the city. So this is very important. The acting Secretary of Defense on January 6th was Christopher Miller. And Miller testified that 3 days before January 6th, and this is in the Loudermilk report, and this was in testimony that Acting Secretary of Defense Christopher Miller gave right after January 6th. He said, we got reports that people were coming to Washington, D.C., that it was going to be dicey, and Donald Trump ordered me to bring 10,000 National Guard troops into the city. And Acting Secretary of Defense Christopher Miller said he ignored that order because it wasn't a real order. It wasn't an official order. And so he decided to ignore it. In other words, Trump didn't follow the protocols. So the acting defense secretary, Christopher Miller, said, I'm not going to follow this order. Why? Well, he testified, and it's in the Loudermilk report. He said, I wanted to avoid another Kent state. He said, I didn't want National Guard troops killing the protesters on January 6th. If you read Acting Secretary of Defense Christopher Miller's testimony, again, he was Acting Secretary of Defense on January 6th, he threads a very careful needle. Okay? So he says he ignored Donald Trump's order on January 3rd for 10,000 troops to be in front of the Capitol. He said it. Why? Why did he ignore it? He says it wasn't done through the proper channels, plus he didn't want another Kent state. But that's not the real reason. If you read between the lines, pay attention, okay? This is from January 3rd, 2021, 3 days before January 6th. This is from the Washington Post, 3 days before January 6th. Headline, all 10 living former defense secretaries involving the military in election disputes would cross into dangerous territory. So this was a letter published in the Washington Post 3 days before January 6th. It's a letter written by all 10 living former defense secretaries, reminding members of the military that you have to obey the Constitution, not Donald Trump. Why did they write this? Because by Christmas of 2020, it was apparent that Donald Trump wasn't going to leave the Oval Office. Again, Christopher Miller was the acting defense secretary at the time, and he later testified after January 6 that a conspiracy, he knew on January 3rd, a conspiracy was afoot. He knew a conspiracy was afoot around Christmas. He knew, he testified, that Trump was going to be a problem. A lot of people knew that. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time, Mark Milley, knew Trump was going to be a problem. Here, all 10 living former defense secretaries on January 3rd wrote an open letter because they knew Donald Trump was going to be a problem. Even Donald Rumsfeld signed this. Okay? All 10 living former defense secretaries published a letter in the Washington Post 3 days before January 6th. It was written by Ashton Carter, Dick Cheney, William Cohen, Mark Esper, Robert Gates, Chuck Hagel, James Mattis, Leon Panetta, William Perry, and Donald Rumsfeld. They all urged the military on January 3rd, 2021, to remember they swore an oath to the Constitution, not to one man, Donald Trump. Okay? Trump's, let me read you the headline here. This is really important. Headline from the Washington Post, May 12th, 2021. So, okay, this is a couple months after January 6th, and he's testifying, okay? Headline, Washington Post. Trump's Pentagon chief attributes Capitol breach to organized conspiracy. This is the acting defense secretary under Trump on January 6th, Christopher Miller. He testified Capitol breach was an organized conspiracy. On May 12th, 2021, months after the insurrection, Christopher Miller, Trump's acting defense secretary, testified before the democratically controlled House Oversight Committee about what happened on January 6th. It was not blockbuster testimony for him. It was for the Democrats who were screaming at him and posturing. They weren't listening to what he was saying. He took a lot of grief. Democrats were foolishly demanding to know, where was the military on January 6th? Why did it take so long for the National Guard to arrive? And Christopher Miller testified, again, Trump's acting attorney general on January 6th. He said, but nobody was listening, that January 6th was planned weeks in advance. And while Miller had said leading up to his testimony that it was Trump's speech that sparked the insurrection, he said it wasn't just Trump's speech. The insurrection had already been weeks in the planning. He said Trump just lit the flame on January 6th. When asked if Trump, he was asked point blank by House Oversight Chairwoman Carol Maloney, did Trump uphold his constitutional oath on January 6? And Christopher Miller was resolute in defending Donald Trump. He said, yes, he upheld his oath. Why did Christopher Miller say that? Because Christopher Miller, Trump's acting defense secretary, made it so Donald Trump had no choice on January 6 to obey his oath as commander-in-chief. I understand this is complicated, but because Christopher Miller was parsing words. But he said Trump told him on January 3rd, I need 10,000 troops, National Guard soldiers, in front of the Capitol on January 6th. Christopher Miller testifies, I ignored the order because it wasn't issued properly and because I didn't want another Kent state. But what did he really not want? What did he really not want? Miller is a colonel who served in Afghanistan. He trained at the Naval War College. I believe the reason he ignored Trump's unofficial order to deploy 10,000 troops on January 6 is because he knew a conspiracy was afoot. And he knew Trump was looking for any reason to invoke the Insurrection Act and order his troops to seize the Capitol under the pretense of protecting it. He didn't say that. He said, I was trying to prevent a Kent state. But I'm saying he didn't send 10,000 troops to the Capitol because he knew they would have to obey Donald Trump's orders on January 6. He testified, I didn't send 10,000 troops because Trump's order wasn't official, and all he was willing to say is, I didn't want another Kent state. But I have no doubt that he understood somebody in the White House was orchestrating some kind of violence that would necessitate Trump invoking the Insurrection Act. That's what Stewart Rhodes believed. That's why the head of the Oath Keepers brought all those weapons to that hotel room. Somebody led him to believe that at some point on January 6, Donald Trump was going to invoke the Insurrection Act to protect Congress, and he would then Trump would then deputize the Oath Keepers. Somebody in the White House was coordinating with both the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, who, as we know, their leaders were sentenced to more than 15 years behind bars for what? Seditious conspiracy. That was the conviction. Seditious conspiracy. The Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers were doing security for people like Roger Stone, and some of their legal defense was paid for by Donald Trump. This is Stanley Woodward. He was one of Trump's go-to lawyers. Please pay attention to this. Please, if you're still with me, because I'm building to and Google me as we go along. You know, it's very easy to fact check what I'm saying. This is Stanley Woodward. He was one of Trump's go-to lawyers for all the White House aides who were questioned by law enforcement or when they were brought before congressional committees, especially after Trump left office. So Stanley Woodward, if you worked in the White House and you were being investigated by the Justice Department or the January 6th committee, call Stanley Woodward. Trump world will pay for it. And that's out in the open. That's a fact. For example, you're going to be seeing a lot of this guy, Walt Nauta. He's Trump's valet. You see him all the time. He's working for Trump. He was indicted for mishandling classified documents along with Donald Trump. His lawyer, Walt Nauta, was Stanley Woodward. Well, that makes sense because here's Stanley Woodward with Walt Nauta. It makes sense that Trump would pay for Walt Nauta's lawyer. Trump is charged with ordering Walt Nauta to hide classified documents from the FBI. He still works for Trump. He's been loyal. He's in the inner circle. So why not use some money from the Save America PAC to pay Stanley Woodward to represent Walt Nauta? Okay? Stanley Woodward. Stanley Woodward also served as lawyer for the guy on the right. That would be Kelly Meggs. The guy on the left is Stewart Rhodes, who founded the Oath Keepers. The guy on the right is Kelly Meggs, who worked with Rhodes. Rhodes was doing close to 20 years for seditious conspiracy because of the role he played on January 6th. He got pardoned. There was some reporting that Sidney Powell, Trump's lawyer, who has already pled guilty to trying to overturn the election down in Georgia, there are reports that Sidney Powell helped pay Stewart Rhodes legal fees. Donald Trump's close attorney, Sidney Powell. What is she doing paying the legal fees or allegedly paying the legal fees of an Oath Keeper? Maybe these reports were wrong. But we do know Kelly Meggs on the right, an Oath Keeper, one of the top Oath Keepers, who was doing 12 years in prison for seditious conspiracy, seditioned. He's now free because he was pardoned. Close conspirator with Stewart Rhodes, the founder of the Oath Keepers. His lawyer, Stanley Woodward. Why is Stanley Woodward, Trump's lawyer, defending Kelly Meggs, an Oath Keeper? Again, I understand why Stanley Woodward would be paid to defend Walt Nauta or Dan Scavino. These are people who are in Trump's inner circle. But why is Stanley Woodward defending Kelly Meggs, one of the top Oath Keepers, who ended up, until the pardon, being ordered to serve 12 years in prison for seditious conspiracy? Stewart Rhodes, the head of the Oath Keepers, testified during his trial, that would be in 2022, his trial, that he came to D.C. in the lead up to January 6th with the Oath Keepers, with the weapons in his hotel room. He said, under oath, that he assumed left-wing protesters, Antifa, which doesn't exist, but he testified that he believed Antifa would storm the Capitol on January 6th. Donald Trump would be forced to invoke the Insurrection Act to protect members of Congress, and that Trump would deputize the Oath Keepers to assist our military. Where did he come up with this idea? Who told him? A witness testified during the trial that Rhodes had some sort of back-channel communications with somebody inside the White House. Again, how is it possible that Stanley Woodward defended Walt Nauta, Trump's valet, Trump's body man. There he is on the left. You're going to see Walt Nauta for the next 2 years. He's on the campaign plane on the far left. Here he is handing Trump an umbrella, never leaves Trump's side. How is it possible that his lawyer, the one Trump paid for, Stanley Woodward, this guy, Stanley Woodward, also served as the lawyer for this guy, Kelly Meggs, on the right, who was, up until the pardon, doing 12 years for seditious conspiracy. Seditious conspiracy for the role he played on January 6th. Headline from Reuters. This is from January 6th, appropriately enough. January 6, 2025. Headline: Trump appoints lawyer Stanley Woodward to White House role. That would be, I believe, the fifth criminal attorney of Trump's working either for the Justice Department or the White House. Trump's transition team said that Woodward would serve as an assistant to the president. He would be a senior counselor. He would work very closely with Trump's White House chief of staff, Susie Wiles. Well, in Trump world, people always rise to their highest level of incontinence. Not incompetence, incontinence. They rise to their highest level of incontinence. I'm talking about their inability to control themselves. These guys will get caught. They can't help themselves. Even with qualified presidential immunity, these guys can't help themselves. So far, Stanley Woodward has been able to collect huge fees defending Trump's valet, an oath keeper, Dan Scavino, Peter Navarro. Does anybody win? I think Dan Scavino didn't go to jail. Peter Navarro, the oath keepers, Nauta didn't go to jail. But now he's going to be inside the White House. He'd be well advised to remember that things move very quickly. January 6th seems like ancient history. It was only 4 years ago. A lot can happen, especially in exactly 2 years when Democrats hopefully regain control of the House or the Senate. Things move very quickly. It was just 4 years ago that Rudy Giuliani stood on the ellipse, opening for Donald Trump, calling for trial by combat. It was just 4 years ago that Rudy groped White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson backstage waiting for Donald Trump to ignite the insurrection. In her book, and most of you have read it, Cassidy Hutchinson, the White House aide, says Rudy groped her backstage on the ellipse. She said while Rudy's groping her, his partner in crime, attorney John Eastman, was leering and smiling and laughing as Rudy pretty much assaulted her. But now John Eastman and Rudy are disbarred. They can't practice law. They're broke. All in 4 years. Less than 4 years. Less than 4 years. And they're both facing more criminal trials. Rudy has something like 20 civil trials, literally 20 civil trials, and 2 criminal ones, all going at the same time. And John Eastman had to tap into his wife's retirement fund to pay the bills. A lot can happen in 2 years. A lot can happen. In his report on the January 6th committee, Barry Loudermilk accused Liz Cheney of witness tampering while she was serving on the January 6th committee. Witness tampering. This is what Barry Loudermilk, who's going to now be in charge of the new January 6th committee, is accusing Liz Cheney of witness tampering. It's bullshit. Most of you've read Cassidy Hutchinson's book. And if you haven't read it, read it. And then read Liz Cheney's book. You know, there's a pattern here of women, and only women, doing the right thing. Headline. This is from Law and Crime, December 22nd, 2022. So, this is the headline. The less you remember, the better. Cassidy Hutchinson's deposition transcripts turn up the heat on her lawyer. Headline from CNN, December 22nd, 2022. Cassidy Hutchinson told the January 6th committee she felt pressure from Trump allies not to talk and instead risk contempt. She told the January 6th committee that Trump allies were telling her, keep your mouth shut. Better you should get a contempt of Congress charge. This is from CNN, December 22nd, 2022. The final straw for former Trump White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson with her first attorney, paid through allies of former President Donald Trump, came when he told her to stop cooperating with the January 6th House Select Committee, even if she risked a contempt of Congress charge. Transcripts of her interviews and sources familiar with her testimony tell CNN. Hutchinson made the comments when she returned to the Select Committee in September to discuss the pressure campaign she felt from Trump allies. Quote, I'm effed, unquote. Hutchinson testified, she said to her mother in the days leading up to her first interview with the committee in February. It's all in 2022. Hutchinson said she felt she had no other option but to retain Trump-aligned lawyer Stefan Passantino because she couldn't afford to pay high costs of other lawyers she contacted to represent her. That would be Stephen Passantino on the left. This is from the New York Times, March 19th, 2024. Headline, Ethics panels dismiss complaints against former lawyer for January 6 witness. The witness, Cassidy Hutchinson, declined to cooperate with inquiries into Stefan Passantino, prompted by her assertions that he pressed her to protect Donald Trump. Okay? So there were some bar complaints against Trump's lawyer, Stefan Passantino, and the ethics panels dismissed the complaints because Cassidy Hutchinson didn't want to get involved. From the New York Times, March 19th, 2024. Legal ethics watchdogs in the District of Columbia and Georgia have dismissed complaints against the lawyer Stefan C. Passantino over allegations that he pressured a former client, Cassidy Hutchinson, to remain loyal and protect former President Donald J. Trump by saying little to Congress about his conduct, that would be Trump's conduct, in the lead up to the January 6, 2021 Capitol attack. Mr. Passantino drew scrutiny after Ms. Hutchinson, a former Trump White House aide, hired a different lawyer and then provided more damaging details about Mr. Trump to the House committee that investigated the events culminating in the January 6 riot. Mr. Passantino had worked in the White House counsel's office under Mr. Trump, and his legal fees were being paid by Mr. Trump's Political Action Committee. More from the New York Times, March 19th, 2024. Ms. Hutchinson told Congress that Mr. Pasentino had coupled advice to say she remembered little with assurances that she would get a, quote, really good job in Trump world, unquote. Her allegations led to the filing of complaints seeking to have him disbarred by various critics, including a group called Lawyers Defending America. A lawyer for Ms. Hutchinson, Bill Jordan, said she had not gotten involved in the reviews by various bar associations. Ms. Hutchinson chose not to participate in the reviews of the bar complaints brought by others seeking to discipline Mr. Pasentino, since she wanted to put the well-documented issues related to his representation of her in the past, she said. The Office of Disciplinary Counsel with D.C.'s Board on Professional Responsibility did fault Mr. Pasentino for violating a rule that required him to provide Ms. Hutchinson with a written document setting forth the scope of his representation and legal fees. Mr. Pasentino apparently told the panel he did not provide an engagement letter in writing because he was worried the House January 6th committee would subpoena it. In a February 2nd letter, the office said that while Ms. Hutchinson had consented to having Mr. Pasentino's fees paid by the Political Action Committee aligned with Mr. Trump, putting the arrangement in writing is mandatory under Rule 15B of the District of Columbia's Rules of Professional Conduct. It required him to take legal ethics trainings classes during a probation period. So he was forced to take a legal ethics training class. But citing Miss Hutchinson's unwillingness to talk to investigators, the office said there was insufficient evidence on the larger matter. Quote, Ms. Hutchinson made some allegations about your conduct to the committee, but she refused to cooperate in our investigation, it said. Quote, accordingly, except for the Rule 1.5b allegation, which you admit, we are not proceeding on her other allegations at this time. We are unable to prove those allegations by clear and convincing evidence, as we must. A February 26th letter from the State Bar of Georgia, right? First it's the Washington, D.C. Bar, now it's the State Bar of Georgia, also said it had failed to obtain sufficient evidence to justify formal proceedings, and so was dismissing the grievance against him. So there were 2 bar complaints against Stefan Pasentino. They were tossed out because Cassidy Hutchinson had enough, right? He was the first lawyer. Read the book. He was the first lawyer. According to Cassidy Hutchinson, the first lawyer paid by Trump said, allegedly, just say you don't remember. Say you don't remember anything. Sure, maybe you'll be charged with contempt, but there's some jobs waiting for you in Trump world. That's the allegation made by Cassidy Hutchinson. So she went and testified before the January 6th committee and withheld information, felt bad, fired Pasentino, contacted Liz Cheney's office and said, there's some stuff I need to tell you, but I can't afford a lawyer. This where are we? This is Andrew Weissman. He's a former prosecutor, and he's top deputy. He was the top deputy to Special Counsel Robert Mueller. He was in on the Mueller report. He's now a legal analyst for MSNBC. This is a lawsuit I find worth following. So he tweeted on September 15th, 2023, talking about Cassidy Hutchinson's lawyer. He writes on Twitter, Hunt also is Cassidy Hutchinson's good lawyer, not the one who coached her to lie. Okay? So, Pasentino sued Weissman for defamation over that tweet. So this is a case I'm interested in because it hasn't been dismissed. Pasentino claims that Weissman publicly and falsely accused him of coaching Cassidy Hutchinson. It's a lie in her testimony before the House Select Committee on the January 6th attack. Pasentino says that tweet has damaged his reputation and caused him to lose business and income. He notes that Cassidy Hutchinson testified that I never told her to lie. Well, that's true. Allegedly, he told her not to remember. I believe that's what she said. She said, he didn't tell me to lie. He told me not to remember. Okay. Now that you've been reminded of who Cassidy Hutchinson was, let's return to the Loudermilk report, which came out at the beginning of the month. This is a report on the January 6th committee. It's a hatchet job on the January 6th committee. And he's now going to be leading a congressional investigation into the January 6th committee. This is what Loudermilk and the Republicans are saying about the January 6th committee's final report. They're saying Cassidy Hutchinson gave contradictory testimony. Yes! Yes! She said one thing when Pasentino was her lawyer, right? Pasentino, in the early part of 2022, Trump's paid for Pasentino. She testified and said one thing, and then she contacted Liz Cheney and said, I feel terrible. There's more I need to tell you. I need to get rid of this lawyer and get a new one. Yes, so that's why she gave contradictory testimony. The other charge Barry Loudermilk is making is that Liz Cheney colluded with Hutchinson to change her testimony. And Loudermilk said, and they never informed her attorney, Stephen Pasentino. Read the book. Read Liz Cheney's book and read Cassidy Hutchinson's book. Cassidy Hutchinson contacted Liz Cheney and said, the testimony I gave you when Stephen Pasentino was my attorney wasn't entirely accurate. In her book, Liz Cheney said she helped Cassidy Hutchinson find a new lawyer after Hutchinson called the committee saying she wanted to retract her previous testimony. And Barry Loudermilk and the Republicans are saying Liz Cheney colluded with Cassidy Hutchinson to change her testimony. She didn't collude with her. She was contacted by Cassidy Hutchinson, who said, I need to change my testimony. The other accusation, this is why Biden pardoned the January 6th committee. They accuse Cheney, the committee, and Cassidy Hutchinson of conspiring to disbar Pasentino. I just showed you that Cassidy Hutchinson wouldn't participate in the disbarment hearings. The bar ethics complaints have all been dismissed against Pasentino. Why? Why have they been dismissed? Because Cassidy Hutchinson, much like Pete Hegseth's ex-wife, wants it behind her. It's very grueling to try to figure all this out. Imagine being Cassidy Hutchinson. Imagine being Pete Hegseth's ex-wife or the sister-in-law who filed the affidavit, or the woman who charged Pete Hegseth with rape and, according to what I've been reading, was willing to talk to Susan Collins, the Republican senator from Maine, and she wouldn't meet with her. So it's exhausting parsing through this. Imagine what these women go through. All right. Sorry about that. That is just something that if I didn't put it out there, I hope it was, well, it's not completely clear. There's some unanswered questions. Google everything I just told you, please, and correct me in the comments section. We have a problem with judges who don't write clearly, and we have a problem with lawyers in America. We have a problem with lawyers we have a problem with lawyers. Big problem with lawyers. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Don't go away. I know this last part was kind of in the weeds. That's why I saved it for the last part of the show. Stay with me. Thank you to Mila and Bob in the chat room. What's tomorrow? Probably I'm going to try to take the weekend off. I'll do another show probably. I'm going to try to do a show early Friday. You know, like my fantasy is to do a show at like 9 p.m. Eastern, like a normal person. We'll see. Okay, that's it. As my mother said, I don't like cowards.